in preparing the organisation and our people for the transition to UK research and innovation. We'll then sort of break out onto the tables, have a bit of a discussion. We'll have some reporting back on that so that we can share the views that are around the group. Then we'll have an update from Rob on where the programme is. Again, another opportunity for Q&A. And then we're kind of closed. So I think really the key purpose is really to share, for you to learn a bit more about what's going on more widely. But I think really importantly, as Rob has already said, is to actually provide feedback to the programme as well. So really take that opportunity. If there are questions that you have, concerns that you have, voice those, and they will be captured and then will actually be taken back. So I think this is a really important part of engagement, and it's a whole series of workshops that the different chief execs and exec chairs are actually hosting, and the format has kind of been adapted and evolved as we've kind of gone along, but it's really, it is what you make it in terms of what you want to get out of it, and that sort of feedback piece. So it's about day one, but it's beyond day one. Day one's not very far away now. But thoughts on where we're going with transformation as well, I think will start to be where we'll start to see some of the discussions. So I think that's where your views on what the new organisation is seeking to achieve and how it's going to do that is important. And I think there's sort of a broader opportunity for you to meet colleagues from other councils currently, but we will all be part of UK Research and Innovation from April the 1st. So again, to get that greater sense of connectivity and networks across the piece, I think is a good opportunity. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about BBSRC, and I kind of want to set the scene for what BBSRC is. Sorry, tell me if I'm blocking this slide, because I move around a bit, which is going to make Rob's job difficult. And including what the creation of UKRI sort of means in a BBSRC context. And I'll spend a bit of time talking about what we've been doing over actually quite a period of time to prepare for this transition. So BBSRC is responsible for supporting the bioscience research community, the research base in the UK. And like many other disciplines, actually, bioscience is world leading, and that's been demonstrated by a number of different metrics. So obviously we want to try and ensure with whatever we do now, but as we transition into UKRI, that we can maintain the vibrancy of the UK bioscience research base and maintain that world leading position, because it's important for delivering social and economic impact to the UK. As with all of the research councils in our Royal Charters, we support world-class research, we support training of the next generation of researchers through our PhD and fellowship programmes. We encourage our researchers to think about the societal and economic benefits of the research that they are conducting, however downstream or however far they may seem from a very fundamental discovery-led programme of research. And we see it as important to promote public dialogue around research and of bioscience. And there are particular topics and themes that the biosciences have to tackle and have tackled and continue to engage in. Obviously, genome editing is something which is very topical. Stem cell biology in the past, an area of my own interest, has been something which has been very topical. So it's very important that we have that dialogue and that we have the licence to operate and we have the public support, because after all they are the people funding the research that we invest in. And in common with many research councils, I'm sure all of us, we invest in research right across the UK, and whether that's our strategically funded institutes, which, unlike other councils' institutes, are no longer owned by BBSRC, they're no longer in the public sector, they are outside the public sector, so they're charities typically, or two of them are embedded within universities. We support a number of research and innovation campuses, national capabilities, doctoral training partnerships, and centres for synthetic biology research. And importantly, we actually also support some pretty specific and highly technical infrastructures. And the example shown on the slide is a 125 million investment in a new National Virology Centre based at the Hurbright Institute in Surrey. Where this is a high containment facility of 14,000 square metres, can house up to 150 researchers who are working on animal viruses which are highly pathogenic. So foot and mouth disease is one of the examples that many of you would be familiar with, and they are trying to understand the virus and develop ways of developing better vaccines, and they have been quite successful in doing that. But in handling the virus, the key thing is that you need highly technical infrastructure, really bespoke, and this is a world-leading infrastructure in this respect, and it needs to prevent any air escaping, because viruses are very small and they can escape. If the air escapes, there will be viruses in that. So this is a very, if you actually go up into the top space of this building up here, you find all of this engineering in order to make that facility work. So just an example of some of the types of really quite sophisticated infrastructure that biosciences actually requires and that we support. So in terms of the types of programs that BBSRC supports, bioscience offers a lot of solutions to help tackle some of the big societal challenges that we're facing. So in terms of ensuring that by 2050 we have enough food to feed the predicted population of 9 billion, it's estimated that we need to produce 60% more food to meet that demand. Clearly, biology, in terms of crop science, animal, livestock science, is really important. Combating diseases, pest pathogens is really important. So we have big programs in that area. We have programs also around reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, decarbonising the future, creating a circular economy, and new ways of generating, renewable ways of generating high-value chemicals, materials, biologicals, medicines, and also as we are an ageing society, and we need to also to make sure that we understand how we can ensure that we age in as healthy a way as possible, because health span is not keeping up with lifespan, and there has been a lot of press coverage of pressures on health and social care as a consequence of that. So if we can actually understand how we can stay healthier for longer, then that's going to be of benefit to us all. So we invest in programs which address these big societal challenges, but we are also supporters of this curiosity, discovery-driven science, so what we would term frontier bioscience, which really underpins everything else. This is the type of science that you really don't know where the discoveries are going to take you, or you're not even necessarily sure what discoveries you will make, but you really want to understand the fundamental properties of a system. And we really support and are real advocates for this area. And many different examples of BBSRC supported science which have led to unexpected impacts have kind of arisen from this fundamental discovery-driven research. And here I just kind of highlight just a few kind of examples. You'll probably all recognise Dolly the sheep, who was the first cloned mammal to be generated. So that was through BBSRC supported research at the Roslin Institute in Edinburgh. And she was born on the 5th of July 1996. And 20 years later, she has inspired a whole area of biology that 20 years ago we would not have predicted. So this is in the field of stem cell biology. I won't go into the detail, although I could. But it's the unexpected impacts from a particular demonstration, a particular discovery that I think is so fascinating about all areas of research that we actually support. But I particularly like that area because it relates to my own research area, so I have particular enthusiasms. And I'll move on because otherwise I won't talk about the others. So we also support, so another example in the middle panel here is work from the University of Exeter, where they've shown that they can use bacteria as factories for biofuels. So obviously that's important in terms of decarbonisation. In terms of health, researchers at the New Quadram Institute, formerly the Institute of Food Research, have over 2 decades developed this type of broccoli which has 2 to 3 times the levels of beneficial compounds which can help protect against heart disease and certain types of cancers. You can buy that in Marks and Spencer's, and they are continuing to improve that. So there's a way of improving health through nutrition, and there's more work to be done around that area. In this panel here, it demonstrates that we actually support technologies and development of technologies. So this is an example of Oxford nanoimaging, where scientists at the University of Oxford have developed a benchtop microscope which can look in minute detail within samples at single molecules. So usually it would one of these would sort of fill this sort of space, but they've miniaturised it so that it's much more accessible and can be utilised within individual laboratories rather than having to be in a big facility. In the middle panel at the bottom, this is work that researchers at the Queen's University in Belfast did to help inform planetary protection zones on Mars. So it's looking at how you maintain the pristine environment on Mars and prevent terrestrial microbes, etc., actually through landings, etc., contaminating the biosphere. I'm not sure there is a biosphere around Mars, but anyway, the surface of Mars. That's kind of quite unexpected. It's not necessarily what you would expect from bioscience. So it's a more unusual example. And the final example is just sort of some of the work that we've been supporting that addresses some of the overseas development assistance research challenges that relate to bioscience. So this is an armyworm, which is a devastating caterpillar for crops in sub-Saharan Africa. And researchers have demonstrated that rather than having to use chemical pesticides to control these worms, there is actually a natural virus which infects these worms and basically dispenses with them. So you can actually use biological controls rather than chemical controls to help control a really problematic pest actually in developing countries. So this is just kind of a bit of a whirlwind tour of some different examples of the type of science that BBSRC supports to give you an idea of the breadth really of what we do and potential impacts for that. And all of that obviously helps to underpin sort of economic growth. And so we've been working very closely with BEIS around developing a bioeconomy strategy. So this is sort of can be considered as all the economic activity that can arise from bioscience. And it spans beyond BBSRC remit, obviously into the medical and the environment space as well. But it's important to recognise that the research that we support helps to drive growth in this way. As with all of the councils, we have been working differently in the last 18 to 24 months. Initially with the Newton Fund, then with the Global Challenges Research Fund, and more recently with the Industrial Strategy and the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. I've been particularly involved in the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, where I've been co-leading on the delivery and implementation of that with Ruth McKernan, Innovate UK CE. So these big programmes, these cross-cutting programmes, are really requiring us all to work in quite different ways, quite flexibly, in quite an agile way. But we've had to do that whilst we're delivering our business as usual, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in saying that that actually creates pressures within our organisations to actually be able to do all of these different things. And I think this is one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about in terms of how do we need to adapt how we are organised within BBSRC and how we work, so that we are ready to work in this way, because I think this is going to become our business as usual actually. And even before we got to sort of that stage, back in 2015, so under the leadership of Jackie Hunter, the previous chief exec, we began to do some work on developing the leadership and the management capabilities in BBSRC to be ready for this change. So this was really sort of preceding, but knowing that the nurse review was going to be published. So it was really thinking, how can we be prepared for that. The landscape is changing. So we've been involved in doing a number of different things. The executive team have done quite a lot of work together, but we've also worked quite closely with around 30 kind of leaders in key areas across the office, across all business areas. And we've actually worked together to help build really the leadership and management of change capability within the organisation. We've strengthened the employee forum so that we are making sure that we are connecting across the organisation at all levels. And we've had some very specific learning and development opportunities available for staff around coaching for change, which has been really helpful, I think, in supporting all of our teams across the organisation. And I think this has meant that sort of at the start of transitioning to UKRI, we've kind of been in a good place. But there's more that we recognise that we're going to actually need to do to support our staff and as we move into UKRI and as we undergo transformation. And it's not just about UKRI and the change that that's bringing, but actually the science that we support is that in order to solve some of these societal challenges that I talked about, we need to do work in a different way. It's very interdisciplinary. Very data is kind of key to a lot of the science that we are supporting now. It's requiring different ways of working. So the research landscape is changing. We've got these new funding instruments which are requiring us to work in different ways. We are exiting the European Union. We don't yet know what implications there are going to be for the research community. But there's a lot of concern in the research space, and I'm sure across all of our organisations, about what the impacts of that are going to be. So we need to be ready and prepared for whatever eventuality we get. And obviously we, as well as sort of moving towards the creation of UKRI. So what, as an executive team and as a chief executive, I have helped, or we have put in place really, is a programme to manage the transition. And we are running this as a programme, so it's quite structured and it's quite organised, and we have regular updates with our executive team, and there's a lot of engagement. And we're calling this the BBSRC Transition Programme. It supports two main areas. So it supports both the transition to UK research innovation, so it's helping to influence the change which is coming. It's making sure that our employees are engaged and personally ready for that change, so supporting them in learning and development opportunities. But as an organisation, we actually have, BBSRC formed in 1994, so science has actually changed quite a lot. There have been, I think, some reorganisations during that time, but there hasn't changed actually very much over the last 5 years. So there is a real opportunity to take a look at how we're actually operating, how we're working, what capabilities do we need going forward in the UKRI world, and what might that mean for how we actually structure ourselves in the organisation. So we have a programme which has a number of work streams looking at these different things. I think one of the most important things that we've been doing is actually supporting people through change, and I've already talked a little bit about some of the learning development opportunities that we've had. People in Development Group have been key in ensuring that these different elements are available for people. Obviously through our annual review process, we discuss with, line managers discuss with their staff what opportunities they might be, because we want everyone to be as well positioned as they can be for what future opportunities may be out there, either within BBSRC or within UK research and innovation. And I think it's the change management piece has been really important, and I think a lot of staff, there are some people from BBSRC are kind of ready for the change, and I think change has probably been a bit slower than we anticipated. I think, in terms of we had thought we would know a bit more by this stage than we do. So I think there's a lot of willingness to get going, and I think with the danger we might get some fatigue as a consequence of that, because we've kind of got people ready and we're kind of holding them in that state. But I think that the work that we have been doing has hopefully put people in a good place. But we've also recognised that people have been under a lot of pressure. And so we've also put in place programmes to support people's well-being. So we've supported mental health first aid, mindfulness, and a whole range of other resilience training as well, in order to help people have the tools really to actually be able to manage the change from their own personal perspectives as well. And we think that's really very important. Obviously, communication and engagement is key, so we've set up a portal which people can actually go to gather information, so it's all kind of held there. We've run drop-in sessions with our transition programme, so people can come and ask questions how it's going. Kind of kicked off with a big engagement session at a CE's talk that I hosted last summer, where we got everyone who was there involved in what our new organisation could look like in terms of all of those different elements that I talked about, and we've used that as a basis for developing the programme and delivering the programme. And we've been able through that to actually help with the UKRI programme, I think, and one sort of the outcomes of that is that BBSRC had done quite a lot of work on our own values, and people feel really strongly about the values within the organisation, and I think through that we've actually helped input into the development of the UKRI values. So this slide just shows each, and there's elements of BBSRC values that map very clearly onto the UKRI values, and so there's a really good alignment there, and so I think that's really good in terms of the culture and behaviours that we'll actually be seeing going forward. So that's just sort of one example of the outcomes of some of the preparedness work that we've been doing. So I'm going to kind of stop there. Oh, actually almost perfectly on time. How did I manage that?